The new German Apple series Berlin ER is just coming out, but I think I prefer its German title, Krank Berlin. Just gives it a bit more of an edge, and certainly matches the tone of this pounding drama. Managing a chaotic emergency room in the toughest and most overcrowded hospital in Berlin is no small task for Dr. Parker, who is seeking a fresh start in the big city after her private life implodes in Munich. But when she tries to implement necessary reforms, Parker is confronted with resistance from the underpaid, ill-equipped, and chronically fatigued hospital staff who only survive with an indispensable dose of black humor. So this is an 8-episode drama that has the first 2 dropping at once, and then it's a weekly release for the remainder of the episodes. Now, I know I say this a lot with weekly releases, but for this particular story, I think chunking it with several episodes at once, or waiting until the end to binge it all, is going to be more satisfying. It'll be emotionally draining, and maybe even a bit psychologically harmful, but it's the best way to really connect with all of the players that are contained within the show. And this isn't your typical medical drama. Now, I haven't seen The Pit yet on Max, so not including that one, this is one of the most frenetic and harried storytellings I've watched about an emergency department. The series starts on Dr. Parker's first day as the head of the ER. Now, she doesn't come from emergency medicine, so this is a whole new world for her, and her newness, it's very evident. And we're thrust into the chaos right from the opening sequence, watching this hallucinogenic-type visual styling that has a character moving in slow-ish motion while the rest of the surroundings are blurred and warped. And then when that's combined with the muffled and uneven audio, the whole scene becomes very discombobulating. It is effective in introducing us to one of the main characters, but it is a pretty jarring start. The storytelling for this is kind of like a slice of life type of arc, this snapshot of a time period where there isn't a singular story each episode is working to establish, and just each one builds on the next to give us a greater understanding of the dynamics between the characters and to show us how they morph in their functioning together. Story elements, obviously, are going to carry over from episode to episode, with some creating powerful moments that were foreshadowed through earlier conversations in previous sequences. And it's not like each episode doesn't provide us with something meaningful, because there is so much character development going on the entire time. But if you are looking for a standout central case, or maybe an emergency that takes the entire focus for an episode, this doesn't really do that, which is why I suggested binging the whole thing at once or then watching it in larger chunks. And because this is sort of the snapshot of time, certain story arcs won't have all the information that makes them feel complete. We have to garner some context clues from the dialogue and then fill in small gaps. These aren't huge issues, though, that create holes within the plot. They're just elements that work to give the characters more depth. And these instances can make the storytelling feel a little abrupt, like portions are just coming out of nowhere, or maybe relationships are strained for some unknown reason. But I think the script does reveal enough to shore up the story to allow it to make sense and then still connect with the different characters. The filmmaking is a little guerrilla style, with handheld cameras that are mostly on Steadicams to avoid a large amount of shaking. There's always movement, so we are constantly on the go, feeling the momentum of each scene, sometimes switching characters as they pass to create a longer, unbroken sequence. And then thanks to the editing, the emotional pacing of the story becomes intensified, allowing us to feel the urgency of a situation or maybe the nervousness that's surrounding an outcome. And don't take away from this that it's non-stop go, go, go all the time. There is a ton of anxiety that's produced in quiet moments when nothing is actively happening other than a character struggling with something. And their experience is tangible, and it helped to really invest me in both the show and then that particular character at that moment. Now, I'd mentioned the funky visual styling the show begins with, and the series does replicate some similar visuals a few times more. Thankfully, though, it stops. For me, I personally appreciated it once or twice, but a couple of times the effect was carried out longer than my eyes enjoyed it, and it became more of a distraction. I mean, I think it's a great representation of someone's perspective, but I would have preferred less usage. Now, the cast in this is excellent, and they are certainly a mixed bag. Their personalities are all intense in their own ways. But I found it intriguing how some of the characters I was really liking at first became some that I loathed by the end. And then the opposite was true for others. And then there were some that I liked the whole way through. But the performances were outstanding in creating personalities that are so dynamic and engaging. And many of the characters are also layered, instead of being one-dimensional heroes or villains. And each of them is complex. There's this ambulance driver, Olaf, for example. Now, this dude is gruff, especially with his newbie partner. And he's almost cruel at times, just unfeeling. at least wildly jaded. And just when you think, okay, I really don't like this dude, he will then show compassion to somebody that you never thought he would. And in that moment, he becomes likable. And he won't always stay that way, but his character shows how there are facets to a character's personality that are most likely hidden down deep as a protection to the horrors that they experience every day. One of my favorite characters in the show is Ben, this trauma surgeon who is massively damaged as a person. He is struggling on a huge scale, and despite that, he has this unwavering desire to help everyone, even if it means bending the rules. And he's a character that you can love to love and love to hate all at the same time. Mainly because he's his own worst enemy, and it's so painful to watch him go towards a path of self-destruction. So many of the characters created these deep types of feelings for me too. I mean, I didn't expect to connect with them as intensely as I began to. The first episode, even the second, it hadn't really sold me on the show. I mean, it was stressful, hectic, overstimulating, even depressing. But I wasn't fully hooked on just watching this crew deal with their daily catastrophes. But that's also what ended up engaging me. There wasn't a daily case that held the story together. Instead, it was the intersecting hurdles, challenges, successes, and then obviously failures too, of all of the characters that then grabbed hold of me. There's so many moral issues that come into question also within the storylines, and I appreciate how not all of them are resolved. And then when some are, they're messy. I mean, they're certainly not fairy tale, but instead feel much more realistic, which may be a turnoff for some. I mean, this isn't really escapism watching, but it is incredibly enjoyable in a dark way. So overall, Berlin ER or Krank Berlin can be an enjoyable watch, but it's also emotionally draining thanks to the heightened frenzy of the situations. The cast, while difficult to warm up to initially, builds characters who become sympathetic and engaging through heartbreakingly realistic personalities full of immense flaws that are counteracted by unselfish acts. The slice-of-life story arc may not be fully satisfying, and the weekly episodes may not provide the story hook to draw you in week after week, but as a binge, this is a giant character study, examining how far individuals can be stretched and bent under the direst of circumstances before they break. And with these characters, they can take a ton. With immersive filming and tight editing, the story plays out almost like a real-time drama, enveloping us in the frenzy of the ED while we hold our breath to see what transpires. There's sex, no nudity, a ton of profanity, and then a massive amount of violent imagery and gore. I give Berlin ER 4 out of 5 couches. All right, so there are any excellent medical dramas that you've seen that you can recommend to me? I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.